Sometimes classes have more than one constructor. We've seen that in the Java docs when the constructor section lists multiple constructors, and now we're going to see what that looks like in the code. When we have more than one constructor in a class, we say that the constructor is overloaded. So in the person class, we can see that we have two constructors here. Both say public person, that's how we know that they're constructors, but they have different parameters. Our first constructor requires two strings as parameters, and our second constructor requires just one string. In order to overload a constructor, each constructor needs to have either a different number of parameters or a different type. So for example, if we added a third constructor and we wanted it to have two parameters, we would need to make sure that at least one of those parameters was not a string, because it needs to have a different data type than the parameters in the other constructor that has two parameters. So when you're reading a class and you notice that it has two constructors, you can pick which one you want to use, and you'll know just depending on what you want to do. So in this example, if we know the birth date, we're probably going to pick the first one. If we don't know the person's birth date, we're probably going to pick the second one, because we can see this one sets birth date to unknown. So in our main class, I have an example of both. So to use the first constructor that requires two parameters, we have person P gets new person, Jane, January 14, 2000. So those are our two string literals getting passed to the first constructor. And then to use the second constructor, we have person P2 gets new person John. So we're just putting one string literal there, and that is telling Java to use the second constructor. So you don't have to indicate in any way which constructor you're using other than the parameters that you pass. So Java will know by the parameters that you pass, the number and the data type, which constructor you want to use. And we can see here when we print out the birth date for both P and P2, since we passed this string literal as the birth date for P, and then in the constructor that went into the variable B, and then we set birth date to the value in variable B. Then when we call get birth date, that's going to return that string literal. And so we can see it printed out over here. For the second one, since we use the second version of the constructor, when we call get birth date, it's going to print unknown because we use the second version which set birth date to unknown. So when we call get birth date, it's returning the string unknown.